Hi all, welcome back to the reading of Flight from Death. We are on chapter 4, part 2. The chapter ran a little longer than anticipated the last time. I think they finally make it into town, so maybe we'll meet one of those ghosts. I'm super excited. I just really want to know how a vampire, a blue water dragon, and a werewolf exorcise ghosts from an inn. And mind you, I'm not reading ahead. I'm reading this with you guys, so I honestly have no idea what's going to happen. So, let's start. As we eased into the town, Alex plugged Patrick's address into the GPS he had his Range Rover retrofitted with. He lives on W Street, right across from the front of Fort Worden State Park. I had done a little reading on Port Townsend, enough to know that the old military fort had been turned into a state park. It sounded like a beautiful place, with access to the beaches where I could take a dive in and swim out enough to shift into my dragon self. I'd have to go at night or early in the morning to avoid attention, but I was determined that I wouldn't let this opportunity pass me by. Now that we were in the town, I realized I was actually excited. I've been stuck in the city for months, and this was the first time I'd had the chance to see any other place over Earthside other than the Seattle area. The forest had been gorgeous, spooky as hell, but gorgeous. The dragon reaches, even the temperate climes of the greens, had the jungles of the red dragons had a far different feel. They were more open, and far fewer spirits had ever passed through them. I leaned forward, examining the houses as we passed by them. Most were dark. By now it was nearly 11:30, but in some of the homes lights still shone, and I could make out that a number of the houses were in Victorian in style. Walnut Street, which paralleled the water, curved to the left and turned into W Street. To the left were houses, to the right the street bordered the park. We passed Redwood Street, then Ash, and then Alex swung into a driveway. A hand-carved sign that looked both rustic and artistic at the same time read, "Welcome to the High Tide Bed and Breakfast." So what happens if you're human and you're passing through town and you want to stay there? Do you become food? As we stepped out of the car, the front door opened, and a man came out to stand on the porch. His eyes had a faint, pale shine to them. Vampire. Sorry, it's just italicized for no reason, because we knew it was vampires. Ralph hauled his backpack and rolling suitcase out of the back of the Range Rover, then lifted mine out for me. I thanked him and picked it up. Though I wasn't anywhere near as strong as I was in dragon form, I could more than hold my own in a fight. Lifting a 50-pound suitcase, I didn't even blink. I can lift a 50-pound suitcase. I think she can too. We followed Alex up to the door where he and Patrick, I assumed it was Patrick, stood facing each other. After a moment, Patrick gave him a broad smile, fangs and all, and held out his arms. "All water under the bridge?" Alex asked, sounding cautious. Patrick nodded. "Blood under the bridge, more like it. I let it go a long time ago, bro. And I get why you refused. I understand now." He flashed Alex a war-weary smile. "I've had to say no, when I desperately wished I could say yes." Alex moved back in then and gave him a guy hug. The pound the back, but make no mistake we're being manly type of hug. Really? Even between vampires? Does it really matter at that point? You're a vampire. Just do whomever. Okay. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but come on. All right. That's a rabbit hole we're not gonna go down. Patrick opened the door. "Please enter, Alex, and your friends." His invitation was a courtesy only. Vampires could enter other vampire domains without an invitation, unlike houses belonging to the living, and they could enter domiciles such as apartments and condo towers and frat or sorority houses. So even though Patrick hadn't officially opened as a business yet, and the house was still a private domain, since it belonged to a vampire, Alex could come and go as he liked. Wait, so a vampire could just come into my apartment? That's not cool. It's still my home. The house was typically Victorian on the outside, huge and at least 3 stories high. Inside, however, it had been completely renovated. Instead of choppy little rooms, more of the downstairs had been opened up into one giant room that felt spacious and welcoming. Seating areas had been arranged so there were several intimate groupings, and yet there was room to create a semicircle of chairs for a larger gathering. The dining table was obviously custom-made, an extra long picnic table, only far less rustic. It had long benches on either side. The table could easily sit 14. The benches had been cushioned just enough to keep the polished wood from being too hard on the backside. Again, the weird little details. Let me take you to your bedrooms, then we can talk and I'll fix you something to eat. For whatever reason, every time Patrick talks, I think of, from Sesame Street, the Count. Patrick turned to Ralph and me. He had a slick, fun feel to him, and I could easily see how he and Alex had hung out together. Patrick wasn't as rugged as Alex, but he definitely had an edge. I suspected he'd had it before he was turned. Wearing leather pants and a smooth V-neck t-shirt that was deep cobalt blue, Patrick had shoulder-length curly brown hair and full lips. His eyes shifted toward the blue spectrum, but I suspected they'd originally been brown. Vampire eyes always changed to frosty gray and silver over time. The cooler the color, the longer the time as a vamp. And their skin color, even if it was darker to begin with, faded. It never fully fade if the vampire had been a person of color before they were turned. But if they'd been Caucasian, over time they would become albino. As I studied his looks, I realized Patrick was pretty hot. He reminded me of a European rock star. As I passed by him on my way to the staircase, he leaned close and let out a little purr. I'm so glad you could come with Alex. I glanced at him, startled. He was hot, all right, and he knew it. I wasn't immune to vampire glamour. That much I knew from experience. You're a lovely one. How did you happen to start working for good old Alex? Patrick's voice was all golden honey, suggesting so much with such few words. Alex quickly intervened, his voice just on the edge of growly. Shimmer, meet Patrick. Patrick, back off. She's my associate as well as a blue dragon. She could eat you for dinner without blinking, and I'm not talking about your dick, so get your mind out of your pants. Oh, man. Jealous vampires. Patrick laughed, just a little edgy. So she's yours, is she? No worries. Hands off. Behind me, Ralph shifted uncomfortably. Yes, uncomfortably. The fuck, yo? She's a freaking dragon. She doesn't belong to anybody. Shit. Man, I would eat him on principle. I decided the best tactic was to ignore the testosterone war and be congenial, but play it cool. Do vampires even have testosterone? Alex took me on as a project for the Wing Liege. I shrugged. Apparently, the dragon reaches. I'm considered persona non grata, so they sent me to Earthside. Basically, I'm indentured to Alex for 5 years. So when the boss says jump, you jump. Patrick eased over the words. He glanced over at Alex, and I had the feeling something had passed between them. A scuffle or something, but it vanished, and once again we were headed upstairs. Ralph and I were given the rooms on the 3rd floor. I still have to furnish the 2nd floor, Patrick said, or rather refurnish it. I'll tell you more about that later. The rooms were spacious. By their size, it was obvious a few walls had been knocked down in order to turn what must have been 4 bedrooms into 2 suites. Each room had its own bathroom, and the view from my window overlooked Fort Worden State Park. Put your things away and then join us downstairs. We'll be in my office or the kitchen. The office is off the hall that leads from the great room back to the kitchen and laundry. Meanwhile, I'll show Alex to his room, and the basement has been fully renovated for my guests who require less sunlight. Patrick motioned to Alex and they headed downstairs. After the two disappeared from sight, I glanced over at Ralph, who sagged against the door. What do you think of him? I kept my voice low, just in case Patrick's hearing was extra sensitive. Ralph shrugged. You know, I think he's trustworthy, if a little sleazy. Well, as much as you can get with any vampire. Alex is the only vamp I've ever really trusted. But then again, their kind and my kind have never gotten along as very well. I'm not sure where the old feud began, but you have to bet it was probably over something stupid. I nodded. I was rapidly becoming aware of an entire subset of interactions that I had never considered before. Soups didn't figure into the dragon reaches any more than humans did. When I really think it over, I really have lived an insular life. Up in the dragon reaches, there aren't very many other creatures. Oh, cattle and wild animals, and some of the Northland folks made their way into our realm and settled there. But I'm beginning to realize that, as a rule, my kind don't play well with others, let alone with each other. Teamwork isn't a concept we come by naturally. Ralph moved to return to his room, but then paused. I know the circumstances are less than ideal, but Shimmer, do you regret being here? Earthside, I mean? I had to think about that answer, because even though I opened my mouth to say of course, I realized that wasn't exactly true. I genuinely liked Bat and Ralph and my relationship with Alex. Well, that was on a swiftly evolving escalator, and then there was Stacy. No, I'm beginning to think that this isn't so bad, Ralph. My life in the Dragon Reaches wasn't the same as other dragons have. I think most dragons would kick and scream before letting themselves be sent Earthside. It's rare to meet one who likes interacting with humans, the nature of the beast, you might say. I felt like I was running around and around the subject, but it really wasn't any easy question. I was fighting a lifetime of training, and I had been expected to have the same perspective as the rest of my people while still accepting their disdain for me. I'm going to jump out on a limb here and say I think this might be good for me. I don't want to treat others the way I've been treated back there, so I want to lose what prejudices I had, or at least be forced to question them. How's that for an answer? Ralph patiently listened, then jerked his head toward his room. I get it. Okay then, I'm going to go put away my clothes, then I'll meet you downstairs. He shut the door behind him as he left. As I heaved my suitcase up on my bed, I hoped that I hadn't sounded insulting, but Ralph hadn't given me an indication that I had said anything offensive. I opened the top dresser drawer and unzipped my suitcase. As I began to lay out my clothes, a noise startled me, like slamming, and I turned around. The door was shut. I stared at the dresser. This time I suspected that it wasn't Chai announcing himself. Okay, let's try this again. I opened the door, and as I turned back to get my shirts, a scrapping sound echoed through the room. I whirled around. The door was shut. Can you please not do that? I had no clue who I was talking to, but I wasn't in the mood for games. I'm staying in the room. I'm here. Deal with it. Ooh. Normally, I knew it wasn't wise to be surly with ghosts, but we'd had a long ride. I still felt guilty over the fairy incident, and I wasn't in the mood to argue. I yanked open the door and stood back and stared at it. Nothing. Still keeping my eye on the door, I leaned around to once again pick up my shirts, then thrust them toward the opening. As I dropped them in, the dresser door slammed shut, catching the hem of one tank top as it closed. If my hand had been any closer, it would have smashed my fingers. Well, if I were human, it would have smashed them. But dragon or not, it would still have hurt. Well, thank you ever so much. That's rude, you know. Now knock it off. I was feeling less inclined toward being polite as this little game went on. The door opened again, and my clothes came flying out to land at my feet. I picked them up and put them back in my suitcase and zipped it closed, leaving it on the bed. I made sure my iPad and anything else that I didn't want broken was in my tote bag. If that's the way you want to play it, I whispered to whoever might be listening, I can play this game too. But you might not like the end result. And with that, I slung my tote bag over my shoulder and headed downstairs to ask Patrick who the hell his freak show ghost was. Yay! We meet ghosts! I don't know why this makes it so exciting, but I'm excited. Anyway, we'll be back next week with Chapter 5. Hopefully we'll get to meet more ghosts. Should be fun, should be interesting, and hopefully there's not a lot of testosterone bullshit going on, because, that's not what we need. Anyway, have a wonderful night, and I will see you next time.